Hi, welcome back to the channel. If Philip K. Dick was a prophet, then VALIS probably equals scripture. The title of the book is an acronym for Vast Active Living Intelligence System, Dick's Gnostic vision of God. As usual, I'm going to talk about some of the highlights, read you some excerpts and show you a series of drawings at the end of the video that I was inspired to do. Let's get into it. The book is written from the first-person perspective of a character named Phil. He tells the story of Horselover Fat. We later find out that Phil and Fat are the same person. Fat is a schizophrenic modality of Phil himself. Philip in Greek means fond of, and Dick in German means fat, which adds up to the name Philip Dick, the author, or Horselover Fat, the protagonist. In March 1974, Horselover Fat experiences visions of a pink beam of light that he interprets as a theophany, a vision of God exposing hidden facts about the reality of the universe. Essentially, the book is about Fat and a group of his friends researching the contents of this theophany or revelation and their search for the fifth savior. Gnosticism is central to VALIS. It is a mix of Jewish and early Christian religious ideas. Gnostic cosmology generally presents a distinction between a supreme and hidden God and a malevolent lesser divinity, sometimes associated with the biblical deity Yahweh, who is responsible for creating the material universe. Gnosticism emphasizes the duality of the material world viewed as a prison and the spiritual realm which offers true freedom. In VALIS, the main character's mystical visions and revelations align closely with Gnostic ideals. Our protagonist, Horselover Fat, believes in the immortal plasmate, a divine living information entity. The plasmate embodies the idea that salvation comes not through faith alone, but through knowledge or gnosis. This theme echoes the Gnostic emphasis on secret knowledge embedded within reality and the individual's quest to uncover it. The novel critiques the falsehood of the material world, liken it to the demiurge, the flawed creator of Gnostic theology. Fat often refers to the oppressive system of power, both societal and metaphysical, as manifestation of this false reality. He perceives the Roman Empire as both literal and symbolic, as an entity perpetuating ignorance and spiritual blindness. Through Fat's lens, Philip K. Dick examines the idea that humanity is trapped in a delusion, and he goes on a quest for the divine spark that could lead to liberation. This novel essentially is Philip K. Dick's way to process what he claims happened to him in real life. It almost is a short version or summary of his exegesis packaged into a storyline or novel. What kind of minds would create a Chinese finger trap for themselves? Some game, I thought. Well, it isn't merely intellectual. The third eye had to be reopened if we were to get out of the maze, Minnie said. But since we no longer remembered that we had that Aina faculty, the eye of discernment, we could not go about seeking techniques for reopening it. Something outside had to enter, something which we ourselves would be unable to build. So we didn't all fall into the maze, Fat said. No, Minnie said. And those that stayed outside in other star systems reported back to Albemarle that we had done this thing to ourselves. Thus, VALIS was constructed to rescue us. This isn't a real world, you realize that. I'm sure VALIS made you realize that. We are in a living maze and not in a world at all. There was silence as we considered this. And what happens when we get outside the maze? Kevin said. We're freed from space and time, Minnie said. Space and time are the binding, controlling conditions of the maze, its power. Fat and I glanced at each other. It dovetailed with our own speculations engineered by VALIS. And then we never die? David asked. Correct, Minnie said. So salvation, Minnie said, is a word denoting being led out of the space-time maze, where the servant has become the master. You do realize that stepping out of the space-time maze requires you to completely be in the moment, in the now, without any attachment to concepts. This includes the concept of self. The challenge is to stay in nowness with all this stuff going on around us. If you realize that, you also understand the tricks and weapons that keep you in the space-time maze. They are, for instance, fear. Fear is a low vibrational state of attachment to self, in my opinion. Because when you fear something, you always fear it in relation to yourself, to a self which is just a concept. Another trap is hope. Hope equals anticipation, and anticipation requires projection away from the now into a hypothesized future. If you combine the two, you have fear of the future, which is the perfect clusterfuck that keeps you stuck in the space-time maze. If you take anything away from this video, it should be this realization. You can turn this into a piece of homework in the coming days and weeks. Observe how much of you or your being is spent in either of those two states, fear or anticipation. And when you observe you are in either of them, or worse, if you are in both of them at the same time, snap out of it and come back into the now. Make that your primary meditation for 2025, and you're going to do us all a favor. A profound tension exists in VALIS between spiritual revelation and mental illness. Horselover Fat's experiences could be interpreted as divine communication or as symptoms of schizophrenia, and the novel refuses to offer a definitive answer. This ambiguity allows Dick to explore the fragility of human perception and the overlap between mental health and spirituality. Fat's mental breakdown following his friend Gloria's suicide drives much of the narrative. His desperate need to make sense of the world manifests in a series of mystical visions and religious experiences. However, these events are met with skepticism by those around him, including the narrator, who insists on viewing them through a rational lens. In Fat's opinion, his apartment had been saturated with high levels of radiation of some kind. In fact, he had seen it, blue light dancing like St. Elmo's fire. And what was more, the aurora that sizzled around the apartment behaved as if it were sentient and alive. When it entered objects, it interfered with their causal processes. And when it reached Fat's head, it transferred not just information to him, which it did, but also a personality. A personality which wasn't Fat's. A person with different memories, customs, tastes, and habits. For the first and only time in his life, Fat stopped drinking wine and bought beer, foreign beer, and he called his dog he and his cat she, although he knew or had previously known that the dog was a she and the cat a he. This had annoyed Beth. Fat wore different clothes and carefully trimmed down his beard. When he looked into the bathroom mirror while trimming it, he saw an unfamiliar person, although it was his regular self, not changed. Also, the climate seemed wrong. The air was too dry and too hot, not the right altitude and not the right humidity. Fat had the subjective impression that a moment ago he'd been living in a high, cool, moist region of the world and not in Orange County, California. plus the fact that his inner ratiocination took the form of Koine Greek, which he did not understand as a language nor as a phenomenon going on in his head. And he had a lot of trouble driving his car. He couldn't figure out where the controls were. They all seemed to be in the wrong places. Perhaps most remarkable of all, Fat experienced a particularly vivid dream, if dream it was, about a Soviet woman who would be contacting him by mail. In the dream, he was shown a photograph of her. She had blonde hair, and he was told, "Her name is Sadassa Ulna." An urgent message fired into Fat's head that he must respond to her letter when it came. 2 days later, a registered airmail letter arrived from the Soviet Union, which shocked Fat into a state of terror. The letter had been sent by a man who Fat had never heard of. Fat wasn't used to getting letters from the Soviet Union anyhow. Who wanted a photograph of Fat and a specimen of Fat's handwriting, in particular his signature. To Beth, Fat said, "Today is Monday. On Wednesday, another letter will come. This will be from the woman." On Wednesday, Fat received a plethora of letters, 7 in all. Without opening them, he fished among them and pointed out one which had no return name or address on it. "That's it," he told Beth, who by now was also freaked. "Open it and look at it, but don't let me see her name and address, or I'll answer it." Beth opened it. Instead of a letter per se, she found a Xeroxed sheet on which 2 book reviews from the left-wing New York newspaper, The Daily World, had been juxtaposed. The reviewer described the author of the books as a Soviet national living in the United States. From the reviews, it was obvious that the author was a party member. "My God," Beth, turning the Xerox sheet over, "the author's name and address is written on the back." "A woman?" Fat said. "Yes," Beth said. I never found out from Fat and Beth what they did with the 2 letters. From hints Fat dropped, I deduced that he finally answered the first one, having decided that it was innocent. But what he did with the Xerox one, which really wasn't a letter in the strict sense of the term, I do not know till this day, nor do I want to know. Maybe he burned it. Maybe he turned it over to the police or the FBI or the CIA. In any case, I doubt if he answered it. For one thing, he refused to look at the back of the Xerox sheet where the woman's name and address appeared. He had the conviction that if he saw this information, he would answer her whether he wanted to or not. Maybe so. Who can say? First, 8 hours of graphic information is fired at you from sources unknown, taking the form of lurid phosphine activity in 80 colors, arranged like modern abstract paintings. Then you dream about 3-eyed people in glass bubbles and electronic gear. Then your apartment fills up with St. Elmo's fire plasmatic energy, which appears to be alive and to think. Your animals die. You are overcome by a different personality who thinks in Greek. You dream about Russians. And finally, you get a couple of Soviet letters within a 3-day period, which you were told were coming. But the total impression isn't bad because some of the information saves your son's life. Oh yes, one more thing. Fat found himself seeing ancient Rome superimposed over California, 1974. Well, I'll say this. Fat's encounter may not have been with God, but it certainly was with something. No wonder Fat started scratching out page after page of his exegesis. I would have done the same. He wasn't just theory mongering for the sake of it. He was trying to figure out what the fuck had happened to him. If Fat had simply been crazy, he certainly found a unique form and an original way of doing it. Being in therapy at the time, Fat was always in therapy, he asked that a Rorschach test be given to him to determine if he had become a schizophrenic. The test, upon his taking it, showed only a mild neurosis. So much for that theory. This excerpt encapsulates the novel's exploration of mental illness, where Fat's quest for understanding leads him into a labyrinth of conflicting truths. Dick presents Fat's condition as a double-edged sword. On the one hand, his visions provide him with a profound sense of purpose and insight. On the other hand, they isolate him, leading to moments of despair and self-doubt. The novel ultimately leaves the interpretation up to the reader. Are Fat's experiences evidence of divine intervention, or are they a product of a troubled mind? By refusing to resolve this tension, VALIS challenges conventional boundaries between sanity and enlightenment. The third major theme of VALIS, in my opinion, is the interplay between divine immanence, God's pervasive presence within the material world, and transcendence, or God existing beyond it. Philip K. Dick explores this through the concept of zebra, a shape-shifting divine force that hides within ordinary reality, in a crushed beer can, for example. Zebra represents a paradox, a God that is both omnipresent and hidden at the same time. Fat describes Zebra as a camouflaged entity that appears to be part of the fabric of reality itself, yet actively intervenes to guide and enlighten humanity. Dick suggests that the divine is not an external force but an intrinsic aspect of existence. The concept of zebra ties into the novel's broader exploration of time and history. Fat believes that zebra intervenes to disrupt the cycles of oppression and ignorance perpetuated by entities like the Roman Empire. This divine presence is a counterbalance to a false reality, offering glimpses of truth and liberation to those that are ready for it. So, through the metaphor of zebra, the novel explores the possibility that the divine is not a distant, transcendent entity, but an integral part of human existence, perceivable only through moments of grace and revelation. VALIS is a complex exploration of Gnosticism, mental illness, and the nature of divinity. By weaving these themes into the narrative, Dick creates a multifaceted meditation on the human condition. He blurs the lines between reality and illusion, sanity and madness, faith and skepticism. Each theme invites us to question the boundaries of our understanding and our reasoning. I find this book quite fractal in nature. I've now read it for the third time. The first time I read it was about 17 years ago, and each time was a revelation in itself. The novel is a sort of mirror, I think, that reflects your levels of consciousness back at you at the time when you read it. Depending on where you are in your development, you will uncover a whole new level of information that is sort of encoded in this text. It is out there, yes, but you'll probably find that it is very much in here as well. I hope I was able to get you interested if you didn't know the book before, and if you've already read it, read it again. On the way out, I will give you the drawings I made when reading this novel. I will read Flow My Tears next. For those of you who celebrate Christmas, happy holidays, and I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.